The Oval Office has seen its share of strained meetings, but the February 28th encounter between former President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was more akin to a diplomatic dumpster fire. The two leaders, never exactly joined at the hip, had a history. There were prior meetings, sure, photo ops at Trump Tower, even a rendezvous at Notre Dame Cathedral. But beneath the smiles, a current of unease always flowed. Zelensky, leading a nation grappling with Russian aggression, craved unwavering US support. Trump, on the other hand, viewed Ukraine through a transactional lens. He saw dollar signs, not strategic alliances. This fundamental disconnect would rear its ugly head in spectacular fashion. As Zelensky touched down in Washington, D.C. on February 27, 2025, the air crackled with anticipation. Would this be the trip where the relationship finally found solid ground, or would it be the one that shattered any pretense of a united front? At the heart of the meeting was a proposed deal, one that reeked of Trumpian logic. The United States, under Trump's watchful eye, wanted a piece of Ukraine's mineral wealth. We're talking 50% of all revenue from sales of rare earth minerals, a gold mine, you might say. But here's the kicker. The deal offered nothing in return, no security guarantees, no promise of military might should Russia come knocking again, just cold, hard cash flowing into American coffers. Zelensky, understandably, wasn't exactly keen on signing away his country's resources for a pat on the head. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about acknowledging the sacrifices Ukraine had made in the face of Russian aggression. By dangling this one-sided deal, Trump wasn't just displaying poor negotiation skills, he was displaying a stunning lack of regard for a key ally. The meeting itself was a masterclass in diplomatic dysfunction. Present were Trump, Zelensky, and then Vice President J.D. Vance, a man who seemed to have mastered the art of looking perpetually constipated. Sources inside the room described the atmosphere as glacial, with both leaders refusing to back down from their positions. Things came to a head when the topic of ending the war in Ukraine arose. Trump, known for his fondness for authoritarian strongmen, reportedly suggested that Zelensky consider making concessions to Putin. Zelensky, having seen firsthand the brutality of Putin's regime, was having none of it. Voices were raised, accusations were flung like diplomatic grenades, and by the time Zelensky stormed out of the Oval Office, the minerals deal lay in tatters, unsigned and unwanted. The message was clear. The US-Ukraine relationship, already on shaky ground, had just experienced a seismic shift. The aftershocks of the disastrous meeting were felt immediately. Trump, in a fit of pique, reportedly ordered the immediate halt of all military aid to Ukraine. USAID initiatives focused on rebuilding Ukraine's ravaged energy grid axed. It was as if Trump, in a bid to punish Zelensky for his defiance, was content to let Ukraine twist in the wind. Across the Atlantic, European leaders reacted with a mixture of alarm and exasperation. Macron called an emergency meeting, reminding the world that, shocker, Russia was the aggressor in this conflict. Tusk, ever the reassuring presence, assured Zelensky that Ukraine was not alone, but the damage was done. Trump's actions sent a clear message. The United States, once a beacon of democracy and a staunch defender of its allies, was now an unreliable partner, prone to temper tantrums and transactional diplomacy. If there's one thing Trump hates more than losing, it's looking bad. And in the aftermath of the Zelensky meeting, he looked very, very bad. So naturally, he took to his favorite digital soapbox, Truth Social, to launch a tirade that would make a Twitter troll blush. Zelensky, according to Trump's very smart analysis, was a dictator without elections. The irony of a man who tried to overturn a democratic election, accusing another leader of being a dictator, seemed lost on him. Not content with just insulting Zelensky, Trump also floated the idea of reinstating Russia into the G7, as a treat. It was a performance as predictable as it was pathetic. Trump, unable to grapple with the consequences of his own actions, retreated into a familiar world of insults, conspiracy theories, and blatant disregard for international norms. Section 6. A chorus of condemnation. Europe stands firm. While Trump was busy throwing a tantrum on social media, the international community was left to pick up the pieces. European leaders, already wary of Trump's erratic behavior, doubled down on their support for Ukraine. Military aid packages were announced, sanctions against Russia were tightened, and through it all the message was clear: the West would not be bullied by Trump's petulance. This wasn't just about Ukraine, it was about the future of the liberal world order, an order that Trump had spent years trying to dismantle. By standing firm against Trump's attempts to bully Ukraine, Europe was sending a message. The transatlantic alliance, while strained, was not broken. Section 7. Echoes of the past, a pattern of sidelining Ukraine. This wasn't the first time Trump had seemingly thrown Ukraine under the bus. Remember those cozy US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia back in February? Yeah, Zelensky wasn't invited to those either. It seemed that Trump, eager to cut a deal with Putin, was all too willing to sideline Ukraine's interests. This pattern of behavior, of prioritizing personal relationships with autocrats over US national security interests, was a hallmark of Trump's foreign policy. Whether it was cozying up to Kim Jong-un or praising Putin's genius, Trump seemed to have a soft spot for strong men who flouted democratic norms. Zelensky, to his credit, refused to be treated like a pawn in Trump's geopolitical games. He stood up for his country, even when it meant incurring the wrath of the most powerful man in the world. Section 8. The future of US-Ukraine relations, a partnership in peril. The fallout from the Trump-Zelensky meeting cast a long shadow over the future of US-Ukraine relations. The partnership, forged in the fires of Russian aggression, now seemed as fragile as a house of cards in a hurricane. Could the damage be repaired? Or were these two countries destined to drift apart? The answer, like most things in international relations, is complicated. Much would depend on the actions of the Biden administration, which inherited this diplomatic dumpster fire. Would they be able to rebuild trust with Ukraine? Would they be willing to stand up to Putin and provide Ukraine with the support it needed? The stakes couldn't be higher. The future of democracy in Eastern Europe, and perhaps the world, may very well hinge on the decisions made in the coming months and years. Section 9. A world watching, the global stakes of a fractured alliance. As the dust settled on the Trump-Zelensky debacle, the world watched with bated breath. The implications of a fractured US-Ukraine relationship extended far beyond the borders of those two countries. It was a test of the West's resolve, a challenge to the very idea of a rules-based international order. If the United States, once a guarantor of global security, was no longer willing to stand up for its allies, what message did that send to other would-be aggressors? Would China be emboldened to make a move on Taiwan? Would Iran feel emboldened to pursue its nuclear ambitions? The world was watching, waiting to see if the United States would rise to the challenge or retreat into isolationism. The future of global security and perhaps the fate of democracy itself hung in the balance.